ISS to Houston, this is Commander Diaz. Do we have any debris close to our trajectory?
Evening, Commander. Negative on that. Clear sailing as far as we can see down here. If there was any cause for alarm, you'd know we'd see it too. Your crew members can keep sleeping tight.
Well, I'm seeing something out there. I can't make it out, but whatever it is, it's getting closer.
Tell you, Commander, we're not getting...
Houston, repeat again. Can't be.
Diaz, copy. Commander Diaz, do you copy?
Houston, you're not gonna believe this. I'm picking up transmissions on the ham radio that sound identical to the suit-side experiment. And that debris, it's an Orlan spacesuit.
I'm not sure I'm hearing you right. Repeat that, Commander?
Suit set. I'm seeing suit set.
You're mistaken, Diaz. Suit set re-entered the atmosphere and burned up years ago. It's impossible.
Yeah, I know it's impossible,
But I know what I'm saying. It's suit set. It's come back. And it's not just in orbit. It's headed right for the ISS. Commander, you're not making any sense. Say that again? Commander. Man, you need to try
Up here, the sky is black. Up here, the sky is black.
Up here, the sky is black.
I need to alert the crew.
Diaz. 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 Commander Diaz, do you copy? Diaz.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Inside Unreal, a show where we learn, explore, and celebrate everything Unreal. I am your host, Dan Hutnick, and today I am joined by a few folks who worked on the Niagara Examples pack, available now on Fab. And speaking of Fab, before we jump in, summer is just around the corner, which means it's time for the Fab June Flash Sale. Get up to 70% off of thousands of Fab assets, including templates, materials, and much more. You've got until 5 p.m. ET on June 5th to check it out. So head over to fab.com/sale to snag yourself a deal. Now, with that out of the way, we have a lot to talk about. So let's not waste any more time and get our guests introduced, starting with Dan. How you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having us. Yeah, my name's Dan Pearson. I have been with the company for 7 years now, focused mainly on Niagara, try and get involved in everything effects. Started out with the Chaos demo, worked on Matrix Awakens, the Electric Dreams, the Big Bang event, Love, Death, Robots episode, which was great, as well as the Witcher 4 and the Marvel 1943 demo as well, just to name a few. Yes, we've been working on lots of good stuff, and we'll go over this Niagara Examples pack and show you all the bits and pieces inside there.
Awesome, awesome. And last but not least, Alim, how you doing?
Hi there. Hi, I'm Alim Chaarani, and I'm a senior technical VFX artist. I've been here about 5.5 years now, working mostly on Fortnite, first as a contributor and then a season lead for gameplay. I moved over and worked with Dan for a short stint last year and got to contribute on this example pack. It was fun and cool, exciting technical challenge. Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you both so much for joining us. Before we jump into the actual content for the show, if anybody out there has any questions for the team here about specifically the Niagara Examples pack, please leave them in the chat. Put in brackets question followed by your question. And we will gather as many of those as we can and try to get through as many of those as we can throughout the show. Please keep the questions related to the topic at hand, which is the Niagara Examples pack. If you have any questions that are outside of that, more ecosystem wise, please head over to the EDC, the Epic Developer Community, where you can find our forums, tutorials, documentation, the whole 9 yards. But with that, quick elevator pitch. What is the Niagara Examples pack, and what was the goal that you set out to accomplish with this pack?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of tutorials out for Niagara which cover like bits and pieces, the fundamentals of the system, how it works, and some fairly simplified demos and examples that have gone out there. We knew there was a need for more documentation and more examples on how to fit Niagara within a wider project, a wider experience. So this project has been in the making for quite a few years now. We've kind of tried to slot it around all our other projects that have been going through. So we tried to put something together that would demonstrate not only the core Niagara product, but how it can be used from blueprints. We'll discuss the Niagara Data Channels, NDCs. We'll talk a little bit about scalability and effect types. We'll cover a little bit on lightweight emitters. So basically, we're just trying to demonstrate all those features that make this a viable tool for your project, and all sorts of little hints and tricks that we've used over the years. This has ended up being an educational and demonstration project. There are lots of things that are tools and setups that you would use in production, but it's more a case of showing you what is there, what can be done. There are obviously lots of different ways that you can use the tool, and this is a core set that we hope you'll find useful.
Awesome, awesome. Well, like I said, I know we have a lot to cover today, so what do you say we jump in, start getting into some of the cool content?
Sounds good.
Let's do it.
Alrighty. So obviously you will be able to find the Niagara Examples pack on Fab. You can either find it over on the website itself, or you can also find it inside your content browser if you click on the Fab button and search for Examples pack. You can find it here as well, and you can add it immediately into your project, which is what I have done here. So I am in the released version on the launcher of Unreal Engine, and I've pre-loaded the Niagara Examples pack. It comes in as a content pack, so you can just add it to your main content folder. It is local to your folder. You can modify it however you wish, and just play around with it, experiment with it, and see what's there and see what's useful for you. Hopefully you'll be able to cut and paste bits out of it, use it for reference, etc. We authored this gallery level. This is what we're seeing in the 3D view here. It's used to demonstrate some of the features, to put it in context, so that you can get a flavor for how this has been set up and how you can use it yourselves. So if I hit play, I'll just full screen this. So just move away, and then you'll see the disclaimer go away. So this is the main level. It's based around some fairly typical demos and example packs that we've done in the past. We have these little blueprints here, which will show little heads-up displays and stuff. These are little blueprints that you can use as an example for any project that you wish to do something similar for. And then immediately you'll notice on the bottom left, we have a few different options. It defaults to doing simple impacts based on a line trace and using the data channel impacts, which we will go over in a bit. But you can also, just by hitting the different numbers, we can change the different ways that these things are triggered. We have some explosions of varying sizes. And then we have the bigger ones. And we'll go through the logic on how these things have been set up in a bit.
And go wrong with explosions.
Exactly. Yeah, they're always fun. I should call out at the moment that Jonas Anderson, another teammate of ours, he's based in Sweden, contributed heavily towards this pack as well. So the three of us as a team worked on this pack together. So we have line traces. We also have projectiles. So if I get a bit more room, we can shoot things off into the distance instead of just a line trace as a different example. We also have different options. There's a ping option, which is useful. Oops. And that will, as I'll go through, I'll probably show you. You'll see how they're orientating to the walls and stuff like that. They'll also show different modes depending upon what you're selecting. We have a day-night switch, which is just driving through sequencer. At the moment, there are other ways of doing this, but we wanted to have a way of seeing how these different systems would react in different times of day, as far as what the exposure should look like, whether it should be more of a fixed exposure or whether we should adapt. And we'll show you some controls for that as well, so you can control yourself. Just switch back to day. So as I run down here, just switch back to a simple impact system. We have some examples for some fire and sparks, just either continuous or little bursts. We also have over here, we have some pickups. So these will actually trigger, as I intersect, it'll trigger onto a little overlay onto your character. We've got some crazy footprint effects as well, just for an example.
Like the bubbles again, too.
Yeah, that was just a fun little exercise just to see how simple we could make bubbles. So that's the whole body version. We have some weapon specific things. Later I'll ask Alim to explain how that setup works. We'll go through that a little bit more later on. Different buffs and debuffs kind of things. It also changes the color of the muzzle flash, which is great. Onto here, we have some spawning from a skeletal mesh example there, and then also from a static mesh with a little like a decay kind of transition for such things. The torches are fun. Alim set these up so that you can actually carry this around. It's obviously quite a crude attachment point at this. We don't have the animations for actually holding onto these torches, but this is, the setup here is quite nice. You can swap them. So now I'm carrying the green one instead of the orange one. And
we should have probably gave that disclaimer that we actually we didn't have any help on this, and so all the gameplay and the blueprinting and everything.
That's a good point.
Please forgive us.
Yes, it was as much of a fun learning experiment for us as far as the gameplay and blueprints are concerned as anything else. So that was a fun one. So the impacts will react to different different physical materials. So we've got wood and metal. So other systems are compiling. This is the first time I've run it today. We've got glass and concrete. Concrete is a default, so anything you shoot will end up as concrete. It'll work both with spawn impacts, it'll also work with data channels, and we'll go over the differences of the benefits of each one. We tried to set up these moving targets to give a sense of trying to compensate for the velocity of your targets, and we'll discuss those. These are the same kind of thing. We're just demonstrating that the decals will actually stick to moving surfaces, both for data channels and for the spawned impacts, which are a subtly different way of handling these things. Over here, we've got this little guy who is it's a way for us to be able to see our effects from different perspectives during Pi. So he's using the exact same weapon as your player, but he's just locked in place, obviously, and he mimics whichever firing mode that you have selected. So it can be useful if you want to get a different perspective on what it looks like close up. If you're obviously from a multiplayer standpoint, if you're watching somebody else play the game, you want to get a different perspective on your effects. And then we go back over that and we'll switch him off. The impact system also triggers physics that sends an impulse into the world by the blueprint. So not only do the systems change their look based on what they're hitting, but they'll also impart an impulse into the world. And then if you're just using a rifle shot, it's a fairly low, but if we switch to an explosion, for example, it gets a bigger effect. What else?
Loading.
So there we go. So all these impacts have decals attached. We've also, depending upon the severity or the amplitude of the explosion, we've changed the firing rate per explosion type so that we're not overloading these things, and it's a bit more of a realistic effect as well, our reload times and stuff like that. So you'll find that the large explosions will only fire like once a second, but as you go down in the calibers, then you get a faster firing rate. Over here we have the Tesla coil, which is a good example for ribbons. This can be adapted to lightning bolts and electrical charges and things like that. Alim set this one up to also demonstrate that you can attach it to your character and have the character change accordingly. I've got some little transporters over here. So this one will take me back to the entryway. It'll take me back out here again. Over here,
Hopefully you notice the material effect on there too. The transporters applies, I think it's an overlay material, and then dissolves you and your weapon. So.
Yeah, that's cool. So footprints, we've got different versions depending upon the physics material that you run across. And then over here, we have some little shooting galleries as you shoot them. I think it has to be explosions. You just shoot little fireworks in. For an added challenge, and I must admit I kind of suck at this, if you set it to projectile, then you have to try and gauge the distance like a fun
scorched earth.
Yeah, exactly. Can I hit it? Apparently not. Oh well, never mind.
We just had someone in chat just say, hey, I was just about to make a Tesla coil effect.
Oh, nice. Excellent. We've included some very simple mist and fog for distance. We've got card versions, which is what these are. They're very simple cards, just for examples. We also included a sparse volume texture variations on these as well. If you have a little bit more performance to play with, you can experiment with HSVs, heterogeneous volumes, and use those instead. We've got very simple smokestacks. that you can use of different scales. We've got little chimneys up at the top, and then the larger, darker smoke plumes over there, which you can play with. And then the final thing I will show before we move on is this one will go to a distant gallery. This is like a cut down version of everything. The reason why we included this is because this is 1 million units away from the origin. So it's useful for testing large world coordinates, whether your scalability, proximity, and distance type settings will work as you expect them to. So we set up this little cut down version, including a few fun little physics-based beach balls that you can play around with, just to make sure that all your effects and all your settings and your blueprints are working as expected. So this is like the cut down version of everything. Just to make sure this guy is still looking. Yep. All right. So the transporter took us back to the entry. Okay, so that's basically everything. I think I've covered everything inside the demo gallery itself. So we can go through and take a look at the folder structure. So the gallery level is in the root of the Niagara Examples folder. That'll get you going. We are using Niagara parameter collections and material parameter collections to control a few things, just to give you an example of how these things can be set up. So for example, in the NPCs, we're controlling wind direction and wind turbulence. We also have a link to the exposure compensation controls, which we can go over in a little bit. And in the linked NPC, that's basically where we're controlling the exposure compensation. So by default, it's set to, it's not going to compensate with exposure. We've tried to dial it according to what most default levels are in Unreal, but you can either set it to fully compensate so that no matter what your sunlight is, and if you go into an interior setting where the light is much lower, then all the emissives will look as they did before. It's a nice baseline. If you want something that's more physically plausible, something more based on what a camera would do if it was on like a fixed exposure, then you can set it to a fixed value. By default, it's at 0. But if you've got a very bright sunlight, you can start dialing in the number of stops that the emissives should apply on top of any emissive value that are in the materials or in the Niagara system itself. And it will react somewhat accordingly to how you would expect a camera to react with a fixed exposure setting. So we also have, so we've tried to group these into more logical folders just to make these things easier to find. So for example, everything with an FX underscore is typically the Niagara systems themselves. So obviously exhibitions are there. We've got the fog. This is a slightly different one. We've actually got a couple of blueprints. So these are the sparse volume textures, but we also have these cards as well. So you can pick and choose the different types of fog. The footsteps are here. We've got a special one for NDC, which is the Niagara Data Channels, which we'll go over in a second. So feel free to browse through these and pick and choose what you would like. Anything that is very specific to the gallery level, we've tried to separate into its own folder. So these are a bit more specific to what is just in the gallery level. Again, feel free to troll through and have a look at these, how they're set up. And then we've got things like the materials, any static meshes that we've used. We've got some textures and some utilities. Just refer to some notes, make sure I'm not missing anything before we move on.
Do you know how many assets roughly there are in this pack that you guys have put together? It seems like quite a few.
There's over 50 Niagara systems. And then on top of that, there's the blueprint setups that we have, a bunch of textures. Like, for example, we can go through the textures, but we've got all of these are There are explosion textures and smoke textures. They're split. There's lots of ways that you could do this. We chose to do emissive occlusion and opacity, hence the EOO names on these things. And then we've got normals as well. It's like a lighting-based pseudo normal for these things to give us a softer fall off. Lots of different ways that you can set those up, but that's how our current master material is expecting these things. And then we have some utility textures, which are just useful for when you're debugging things and setting stuff up. We've got a default cutout mask just to cut down on overdraw. And this is one specifically for an 8x8 sub UV, as well as your typical kind of different variations on grids if you want to test what your submaterials are doing, sub UVs are doing. And then we have some noises. Sorry.
Yeah. No, you're good. I was just going to kind of tangent off a little bit. Is this pack a resource that is good for anybody, like basically of any level? Like if somebody has no idea what, how to do VFX in any engine or Unreal, is this a good resource for them, or does this kind of assume some, base knowledge of VFX?
Oh, I think to be fair, I think it does assume some prior knowledge. It's not a massive leap up, but a core understanding of Niagara is probably assumed right. For these things. A lot of these systems are quite simple. For example, we'll probably talk about the pickups sooner rather than later, but these are actually this is got 4 systems, but these are the lightweight emitters, which are a lot more simplified. For those that don't know, lightweight emitters are a relatively new form of emitter, which is like a fixed function, high performance emitter. You do not have the programmatic control that you have with the full Niagara emitter. There are no scratch modules. The list of functionality inside it is greatly reduced, but this is far more performant. So for, I hate to use the word simple effects, because none of them ever are. This will get you there and be a lot more performant. So I would highly recommend people try these out, understand what the limitations are with them, and use them for your projects as much as you can, because they will give you a performance advantage over the regular Niagara emitters. But these are fairly simple, so you can kind of dig into these and get a sense for what Niagara can do without, delving into some of the more involved emitters that sometimes you'll come across here. Okay. So as we talked about textures, I will quickly go over some of the utilities that we've included. All the sprites that were generated inside here were actually generated with the Niagara Fluids plugin. You do not have to use Niagara Fluids to generate your sprites at all. It was just something that I wanted to do. I worked with the Niagara Fluids with Dev and Penny, so I wanted to make sure that we could use it in a real world example. So this was a cool experiment for me just to do that. We have these some examples, different things that you can play with. One of the things that I find most useful is this little editor utility blueprint. So if you right click and run it, I just happen to have it docked. But this is useful for shuffling channels within a texture and then creating a new texture from it. So for example, if I was, let me look at the utils, it's probably the easiest thing to do. So if I've got this number grid, simple number grid, and then if I take this, I can just drop it onto one of these guys and then just change what the channels should be. Where we're missing red. Save a new texture, and it'll pop up a new variation for me. It's just a more convenient way of doing these things in an editor. You can definitely do these in any other, Photoshop or whatever, but it's just nice to have some of these tools inside the editor, just so you don't have to keep popping in and popping out, etc., etc. Okay, so that's the main format. Oh, I suppose I should, inside the blueprints, there are lots of interesting things in here that you can take a look at. We've tried to break them out as you would in a game. So we've got the rifle is separate, but we also have these blueprint classes which just handle the impacts and the explosions. We've tried to separate it out as much as we can. I would consider it it's kind of on the complicated side as far as the purpose of a demonstration like this is concerned. But hopefully we've split it up enough so that people can pick and choose the elements and the modes that they want to copy into their own games.
And just out of curiosity, just to clarify with that, you've specifically broken these out in this manner to make things more modular and usable for different projects. Like you may not necessarily break it out quite to this extent under like a typical dev pipeline environment.
Exactly. The data channels is a good example of that. We wanted to demonstrate that you can either use data channels for impacts or you could just spawn individual systems. Those are the two main ways that we've demonstrated here. We've included both in this example pack just to demonstrate them, but more than likely you would pick one or the other. So you should be able to cut and paste that part of these graphs out and get that implementation isolated for yourselves.
Great.
So let's go into the explosions first, just to give an example of how some of these systems have been set up. You will find that there are some inconsistencies with the way that we've set up these examples, some of which are just because it's 3 different people setting them up. Different ways of doing the same thing, but also we wanted to demonstrate there are different ways of doing the same thing. So you'll definitely find that as you go along. So the NS explosion, this is the main large explosion, which if you shoot anything that is not dirt, and I'll go over that in a bit, this is the explosion you get. So this is one of the larger systems. As you can see, there's quite a few emitters in here. There's the main explosion, there's the ground, dust, debris, etc., etc., etc. We've deliberately used a lightweight emitter for something that can be fairly straightforward. This is just controlling the decal, the main global light for the system, and then like a flare that happens on impact. So we've kept that one deliberately as our lightweight emitter just to make it as lightweight as possible. We show an example here of how to use the spawn particles from other emitter. So these streamers that you'll see shooting out, they're using this setup and it's generating a ribbon. You can swap the ribbon out for more of a spike-based trail, which is how we've actually done the rockets on the projectile mode, which we'll go over in a bit. We also, as a more advanced setup, I think Jonas set this one up. So this is actually using a post-process component and a camera shake blueprint. So this is a more performance-wise, it's quite an expensive approach, but it is a cool setup to have where the closer you get to the explosion, the bigger the camera shake will be. It'll put a little bit of a post-process on your view as well. So that's a cool example to have there. So talking about expense on this particular one, I'll just give you a wider look at this. So we've set up scalability on these things. So you can see what the scalability defaults are for the engine, and it's epic. All of these are active. If I go down to low, for example, then you can see that it's switched off a lot of these things. We have certain assumptions for low, as in probably mobile or something like that we try and avoid. GPU-based emitters, just for wider compatibility. So we want to keep something that is at least plausible on very low-end devices so that you don't just lose everything or it doesn't become too much of a burden. So in this case, at low, we just have the core explosion. and then we have the decal, the light and the flash. And as you go up the different, so medium, we start to add back in a few things. So we've got the ground dust and the debris. Well, you'll notice that we can also set scalability at the renderer level. So we're not using the static meshes that get spawned by the debris emitter. We're just using the sprite stand-ins. And these sprite stand-ins are only used at a distance, even at epic or high. And then as you go up to high, these things start to switch back on. So the mesh renderer is now active again. And I think at high, in this case, everything is back on. So that's a useful thing for people to be able to experiment with and become familiar with, is if you're publishing out to many platforms, you can make sure that it runs appropriately on whatever platform you're publishing to. Related to performance, we have, sorry, let me just switch off scalability. We have effect types that come with the project. These are some good baseline effect types that set the way that the spawn rates we can dial down based on the platform. If I open this up, I don't know if anyone's seen these before, but there are a lot of different, the wording is quite advanced, so look these up, but you can specify what kind of cool reactions they should have, when the effect type should be queried at what part of the lifetime. And then under here, we have more different, when you put on low, the maximum distance for these systems to be spawned at is set to 15,000, etc., etc. So medium is slightly further away, etc., etc. So these live in their own folder, and we have these 5 set by default for you to take a look at. We've split them in environmental effects, burst and looping, and then gameplay effects, burst and looping. And we've got a special one for Niagara Data Channels. Use these as an example, take a look at them, and then adapt them to your needs. Okay, so that's the explosions. Let's look at effects, the impacts next. We'll start getting into those. So we'll go inside the weapons. We've got impacts. So we've got 4 different types set up based on the type of material that you are shooting. And these are picked based on the physics material that is assigned to each mesh. They're set up in a very similar way to the explosions. So we have different emitters are going to do different things. Sparks, the secondary sparks, which again use spawn particles from other emitter. They're designed so the spark comes out. When it dies, sparks will often end in a little burst, a little flash of secondary sparks. So that's why that implementation is there. And then we've got dust, debris, and another light decal version. We also have, there is some inheritance set up in the way these works, which reminds me. So this examples pack comes with documentation, which is, let me just bring that up to give you a quick demonstration of where you can find that. So this is set up as a course. So we have different pages along the side. So there's a brief introduction where you can find these things. Then we have page on the impacts themselves. We've tried to give you enough information to get you going without it being too overwhelming. And there are supporting documents within the hub, which should help you with specifics on Niagara itself. One for explosions and how those are set up, as well as the materials that we're using. That's the main master material for smoke and fire. We've got sparks, the footprint setup, pickups, and then the arc emitter, which we will get to very quickly. Okay, So let's have a quick look at how the impacts are set up. So we have a special folder here for Niagara Data Channels. Inside there, the Niagara Data Channel asset itself, you will find here. We've got one for impacts. So I'll set up to use data channels if you wish, and also the footsteps. So for example, this is the NDC impacts system. This is a slightly different approach. The approach here is rather than spawning one system per impact hit, which can result very quickly in lots of systems, lots of components ticking at the same time, even if those impacts are quite brief. This version will split the world up into islands, and then for each subdivision, you will have just one system. And the NDC will write information into the data channel, which is just for each impact as it goes. And the one Niagara system associated with that island in the world will handle multiple impacts. So we have to architect the system to be able to handle that rather than it just being one burst, fire and forget. It's more a case of I have a new set of impacts that are coming into the system. For each one of those, I need to spawn a new set of particles. So Alim set these up.
Willing or unwilling?
So these are set up. We go to the debris. So for example, you will see we do have like a wizard which will help you set up Niagara Data Channels, so you can search and search for data channel, and you'll get spawn from data channel, read from data channel, even write to data channel, which is more of an advanced topic. And they will look at the data channel asset itself and help you get these things set up. But these are some great examples for you to look at. You can double click into these and actually look at the graph on how the data channel spawning is set up. This is an advanced topic, of course, but we've tried to keep it as straightforward as possible so people can follow along and build their own versions.
I think Simon has like a document for that too, more in depth, and he's added newer features to it as well.
Yep.
It's a very powerful system. It's kind of like a broadcast listener system, and in a way, calling it Niagara Data. Simon's gonna is oversimplifying it because it can be used in a variety of places, like including blueprints. Audio might be using it as well. Like, yeah, it's a really cool way to take a lot of data and manage it in one pass, and then it doesn't store in memory. So it's very cheap to use. So it's a lot more complicated.
Yeah, we're seeing some love for NDCs. Wow, this is the first time I'm hearing about NDCs. Mind blown. People are
very, very cool.
It came as like a Simon came up with the idea, I believe. It was like chapter 4, season 3, the Fortnite, where Perf was getting, we were getting to the brim, and he had this wonderful idea for impacts. And so he ran it by me, and we set up the first impact setup back then. He did most of the work, and I just helped. And then it just kind of kept going from there. We saw like insane performance implications. I think it does come with some restrictions, but we can get to those later. Yeah, a really, really neat and powerful system, very advanced. Not some of our artists still kind of struggle with it internally. But yeah, it's quite powerful.
Yeah, it is great. So this system is set up to make full use of that, and then go quickly and show. This is the Niagara Data Channel asset itself. So there are different modes that you can set up, the different ways that the data channel will hold the data. You can have a data channel which is just global, and anything that happens anywhere in the world will write to the same data channel. And for some applications, that's totally fine. We typically use they're called islands, and you specify the cell size and how much padding. So in this case, you right into the data channel and you give it a location in the world. And it creates an island for that particular tile, if you want. It's like a 3D tile. And these are the dimensions. And then each one overlaps by 250 units in this case. But you can specify whatever size you want. And then this is the default system that will be linked to that tile in the world. This is the list of data that you're going to place into the data channel. Position is almost always going to be there, and then you can build up on top of that. In this case, we've added quite a bunch of things because we want to be able to control the reflection vector so that if an impact hits a glancing angle on a surface, then the resulting burst goes off in that reflection angle. You can also build in some optimizations based on distance. And then we also have, it now supports this notion of having a spawn count scale, which is built into the data channels, which is really useful for things at a distance, or also different platforms. You can control them. So you can set that scale at the blueprint level, and then the data channel that will flow through to your Niagara system, and you can control the spawn rate at that point as well, which is really nice. So that's what the actual data channel asset looks like. And then if I go to
one thing you forgot, Dan, was the attachment.
Yes, I'll get to that because I'm gonna go to the blueprints part of this. So a lot of this is basically driven from your character blueprint, and it triggers the firing from that. And at that point, we go to whichever rifle or weapon we have selected. So these are relatively simple. We have basically, an event is triggered. Okay, something has been fired. What should be fired? And it gets passed down based on the type of weapon. So that dictates, is it just a simple impact or is it going to be an explosion? And then we branch based off of there. So we have different versions for whether it is just a standard, I'm going to emit a new system on each impact, whether it's being a line trace impact or a projectile impact, which are handled in slightly different ways, obviously. And then we also have a flag on this function to dictate, okay, well, I want you to use the data channels for this. So we can have a look in this particular version. So it's just performing a line trace, and then we're handing off all this information to this supporting blueprint. So I'm just clicking through, I'm gathering all the break hit results. So that includes the distance and the location and the normals, the physical material, what actor and component were hit, etc., etc. So we've got a little bit of a logic here. This is to help us figure out, well, what is the velocity of the target that I just hit? If it's a physics-based actor, then you can query that quite reliably. If it's not physics-based, then you might have to try and figure that out yourself. We try and do a best approximation to figure out what the velocity is so that you can then inherit that velocity or not within your Niagara system. And then from here, again, we're digging a little bit deeper down. So if NDC is true, Niagara Data Channels is true, then we'll go a little bit deeper down the rabbit hole. So this is the test for your physics material. We use this type of thing quite regularly. So just is one of many ways of setting these up. We've tried to keep it as simple as possible, but feel free to, take a look at the logic, cut and paste what you need, delete what you don't, etc., etc. We have this is the thing that where we need to compensate if the target that you've just struck is moving or not. If it's a wall or the floor, then we can just spawn the system. It's fine. It's not going to get dragged around with your target. If you've hit a character or something that's animated, then things like the decal or any of the surface-based effects need to stick to that surface. And we need to do slightly different things to compensate for that. So this is what this main test is trying to figure out. So in the case of data channels, this is the physics impulse, just to fill you in. This is not related to data channels, but we add an impulse at a location. So that's what makes the boxes fly away, or whatever else that is physics driven. So here is where we get into the first step of setting up our data channel. So we make this NDC access instance, the context itself, and that's where we're passing in this flag. It's like whether we should attach it to the surface or not. If something is moving, and correct me if I'm getting this wrong, Alim, if something is moving, we have to create an island for that thing that is moving. If you hit it multiple times, then you will use the one system for those multiple times, but it does need to track with the target, else your decals won't move with the target.
Yeah, that's correct. When we did it this way, so if you go back to the data channel itself, there's a section there that gives you conditions. So there's conditions for attachment if you expand that. But unfortunately, we couldn't figure out how to set up gameplay cues or gameplay tags in this project. I think it's not something we could have packaged with the plugin, and so we had to do it manually. And so when Dan was showing you the blueprint, we did test for movable, and we just assume all movable will be attached. And then that actually attaches a system. And I think it still respects the bounds of the like the 250 bounds on top of the bounds of the actor that it hit. So
we pass in the hit location, and it needs that just to know, where in the world should I be placing this island? And if you're adding multiple entry points to that part of the world, you want to contribute to the island that already exists, if one does exist. You don't want to keep creating more islands. So that's why it's important to be able to pass that hit location in. This is the owning component in this case for if it's attached, so that you're attaching it to the correct component. We left this little debug script in there. We found it useful. You can hook it back in there for debugging purposes. And then this is the part where we start caching out where the position that's going to get passed into the system is. We do the same, zoom in a little bit, sorry. Do the same with the normal, hit velocity, direction, etc., etc. I mentioned that you can pass in a spawn count scale to the NDC itself. This is where we're actually doing a quick calculation based upon distance and an associated spawn count scale based off of those distances. So we calculate that in the blueprint, and then we pass that in as like just a number between 0 and 1, so that you can tell the NDC that this is actually miles away. I don't need 500 particles, I just need 5. And it will adapt based on that. And this is the actual code where the little block where we write to it. Should be fairly straightforward. You'll notice that these match the entries that we have in the NDC. So it's the same data that we're just filling out in the blueprint. And for this example, we're making this data channel visible to blueprints, CPU emitters, and GPU emitters. We want to cover all bases on this particular one, but you can optimize a little bit. If you know you're never going to need it in a blueprint, then you can switch that off, and it just saves a little bit of memory, I believe.
There's a note for the position. So we do the position conversion for the attached systems to local space in Blueprint before sending it, because there's like a frame delay. So we were noticing you can't just convert it in Niagara like you would assume you would. And so we actually, it's better to do the conversion ahead of time. And so that's what those attached component bools are converting it over to local space. And then that way the system that gets attached gets the exact position relative to the object. So when you're shooting it, it actually hits the exact spot. I just wanted to make a note of that. That's why we're doing that conversion in there.
So let's see. So yeah, so going back to the Niagara system, this is what there's a spawn conditional and a spawn direct. And if we look in here, so the spawn conditional, and this is where it's been a while since I set this up. It's basically you're looking at the data that's in the data channel itself, and based upon thresholds and ranges within that data, you can choose whether to spawn or not. So these are all built in, so you can just right click and look at spawn conditional. It should pop up for you. The easiest thing to do is if you've got the data channel interface, is you can drag off these guys and it'll be context aware. So these are all the things that you can attach based on that data channel reader. A little bit easier to find than just trying to type for it. Often I can't remember the names of all the functions. So this is a really nice way of being able to narrow it down for you. Also, if you're new to a data interface is a common terminology in Niagara, where basically any data that is coming from the editor, from the engine into Niagara goes through a data interface typically. So you can add a new data interface and then drag a pin off of it, and it'll filter down all the methods that are available on that data interface for you. So you can browse through and say, okay, that's the thing I want, or that looks useful. I didn't even know that data interface supported that. It's a really nice way of discovering some of the functionality in these things.
Number of times I've discovered something by doing exactly that is
exactly
too many times.
Yeah, it's great. Okay. What else? Okay, I think we've covered everything as far as the impacts are concerned. We'll go over any questions that will pop up at the end, of course, and try and explain them to the best of our abilities.
I wonder if you show them the read NDC, sorry, just briefly, just show the attribute creation. So how those attributes from the data goes into
in the system itself. Sorry,
yeah, in the system, yeah.
There we go. Yeah, there we go. So this is another scratch. So here we go. So on the input itself is the NDC read. So this is based off of a system parameter. Sorry, we're tracking through a few different contexts. This is just pointing to the NDC asset that I showed you in the content browser. So it's the exact same thing. So we just store that in system update, and then we refer to it in different emitters. And that's why we put it at the system level, because multiple emitters are reading from the same data. So it makes sense for us to put that at the system level rather than duplicating those references all over the place. So if I go back to the read from NDC, so this is figuring out an association between the particle itself and what data entry is inside the data channel itself. So it's getting the consistent information back. And then it's reading, this is the same attribute list that you'll probably recognize by now, which is in the data channel asset itself. That's where all the data is being read from. So, and then once you have all that data, you can do whatever you want with it. It looks like this is where we do another space transform just to make sure that we're going back into simulation. Simulation is a special space as far as Niagara is concerned. It basically says, regardless of the space that you are set on the emitter, whether you're in local or world space, simulation is the version that's basically going to say, I'm going to handle both of those and I'm going to just give you the data that you expect. So it's like a convenience for it. So it will figure itself out, basically.
I know that one. That's cool.
And then we're just setting them all as outputs. Okay, what else have we got in here? That's basically it. Yes, some more outputs here for different special cases to help with the different spawn counts, I believe. But that is the main way that we get the data back out of the data channel, is by using this read method that is directly off of the Niagara Data Channel data interface, data channel reader. Yeah, okay. So that's impacts. Footprints operate in a very similar way. The only difference with footprints, of course, is how they're triggered. In this particular example, we're using anim notifiers. And we have set up, let me see if I can track down one of these animations. It's probably easier if I track it down based on the character blueprint itself. So here's my character blueprint. It is pointing to this animation blueprint. So I'll go track that down. So this is the animation blueprint, which is set up. I don't think any of us are experts on animation blueprints, unfortunately. So we have set this up to the best of our abilities. And then in the same folder, you will find the animations that are referring to it. So for example, if I open up this, just jog forward, you'll see that we have set up these anim notify triggers here. So we've gone through, and I actually just hand placed them, thought there aren't that many. And it triggers this AN gallery footstep. It's a blueprint, and I will show you that. So if I go back to the gallery, it's a blueprint. Here is the blueprint. This one is a slightly more fleshed out version of an anim notify, just to demonstrate, we have the bubbles, and we have the fire, and we have the gravel, different footprints to do different things. So it has a little bit more stuff in it, which could be confusing. We also, for completeness, added, should be in here somewhere. Where are you? Oops. There we go. This is a simpler version, which is under FX footsteps, actually. So let me just show you that for completeness. Here we go. This is a simpler version of it. It does still support Niagara Data Channels, but it is just triggering the simple NDC footprint stuff. We've only got one variation, and it does change based on the physics material as well. So all of this is going to look very similar. We're still using the same kind of, we're making the NDC instance, the context, and then we're writing to a Niagara Data Channel in the same way. We're using the NDC footsteps data channel, which is a different set of parameters than the one that I've been showing you for the impacts. And these are the parameters that are set inside that data channel. So we're writing them here. The only difference here is we're actually using a line trace here. So the anim notify gets triggered. It passes through the skeleton information, including the bone. So we find that position, and then we just do a line trace down. Actually, I think we do it based on the orientation of the foot to try and make it a little bit more accurate. You can see our example of how we do that here. So this is it's found that the socket information and the rotations and the locations, and that helps us derive which direction is down as far as the foot is concerned. So we do a line trace to interact with the ground, and at that point we can go, okay, we're walking on lava or we're walking on gravel, and we can decide how we want to change that system. The nice way that this example differs is we can change the Niagara system to be used with the data channel. By default, you would set your Niagara system inside the data channel asset itself, and that would be the system that gets spawned for every island that gets spawned. In this case, we've set it up in a slightly different way just to show you a different example where you're not limited by that. If you want to swap the Niagara system itself, we now have the ability to do that directly within the data channel utilities, the data channel suite. So this is how the we've swapped it out for fire or bubbles instead of the default gravel versus a default just dust foot impact. So this one is once you get into the data channels and you realize that, okay, I need more control, then this is one of the ways that you can have that control. So you'll see here, I'm actually setting the Niagara system itself that's going to get passed into the data channel. This is my default, and I am overriding it here, override system to spawn. So that's a useful feature that we added relatively recently for data channels.
Maybe some more context to that, Dan. So, and we didn't, I don't know if we mentioned it, but the impacts. So what we did for impacts is we took the 5 and packed them all into one system. And then we had a selector. And so, and that's like not a conventional way to work, because, you're going to have, 5 different responses to visually represent in one system, and have to do that per emitter. And so this allows you to do it like separate systems with a singular response or something totally different, just reusing that same data. I can't remember if you mentioned that. Maybe you did, but just to reiterate.
Yeah, it's an important point to note. Yeah. Okay. That is mostly the footprint. So in this footsteps folder, we have a lightweight version, which is a very simple system. So it just gives it's hard to see in this view. If I can put it against a darker background. So very simple, just a dust hit. So we were able to use this with the lightweight emitters, just to cut down, because we're in one mode, you're going to spawn a new system for every footprint. So we were able to do that for the non-data flow version of the footprint assets. And they are set up in the same way. So you'll see over here, we've got 2 different paths. If you use Niagara Data Channel, it defaults to on. So you would use this set that we already have looked at. But there is also the spawn system version, which gets triggered if you are not using data channels. And in this case, it just does a spawn system at location, assuming that your ground isn't moving around. It's going to assume that that's fairly static. Okay, what else have we got? Oh, yes, and this is where we do the bubbles version, just for a fun one, as well as fire and then gravel. And we have on the NDC, we have the NDC versions of bubbles and fire and the regular footsteps one. And those are swapped based upon the physics material that you have interacted with, that line trace hit from your foot. We swap it at the data channel entry point. Okay. So let's take a look at the Tesla coil now. So this is under the ribbons setup. So this is a system that Alim created, and I'm going to keep quiet now and let Alim try and describe this one.
Yeah, so I guess we were trying to give you guys like a way, like a setup that works and can be shipped and is not like super, super complicated. And so one of the challenges, I was like, well, I wonder if I could do like arcing electricity and whatnot. And so the Tesla coil came to be. It's really a spin-off of the original, I think it's just the ribbon emitter that we made. And so if you look at the arc, it's called arc setup, arc spawn, and arc update. Those are modules on the first 2 emitters. So arc main, if you go to the setup at the top, so it's kind of like the ribbon setup. I just added a few things that pertain to an arc. We have the branch count at the bottom. And so what I was doing was just like, well, how many branches, like, we can set random branches, and that way each loop of this emitter would get a random look. And so everything else is mostly the same as the, if you've used the ribbon emitter, it's mostly the same. Um, the one power feature here I wanted to show off was this partition particle setup. I think that came to be maybe like a year or two into me being here at Epic, and it was just such a cool feature to get, because you could take a bunch of particles and then give them their own IDs and allow, like, group them and let them do different things. And so you'll see here what I've done is I've done the sequential version, which is fixed. And so what I'm doing is I'm spawning, like, say, I think it's like 30. If I spawn 30 particles and there's like 5 particles per branch or something, you would get 6 different branches, and then I would place those. Each of those branches would get placed along the main arc. And so I'm doing some, like, hackery here with the partition setup, and then so if you go down to arc spawn, let's see, that gives you some controls of where is it, branch length profile. It's been a while since I've looked at this, so bear with me. But just kind of like some typical settings you'd want on the like your arc. So the lead width, so the lead is the main arc, and then the branches are the branching arcs. I only got to do one branch per lead. I was considering doing multiple, but I ran out of time and brain power. But yeah, you could see the branch length profile along. So, like, I think that's from 0 to 1. I think it's larger near the base of the branch, or the base of the lead, and then it gets smaller at the end, I believe. I'm trying to think of how these profiles work now. But it's so I normalized from the base of the lead to the end, and then I gave each of the branches a value along that lead, and then each of those branches got their own values for width and the angles. And so it's you could dig into that emitter there if you want, or double click in there, and you can kind of see
Into arc spawn.
Yeah, arc spawn. There's like a lot of data coming through here. I don't know if I have enough time to explain it all, but just to kind of see the similarity and the difference. So arc IDs, the ribbon ID. Let's see here, arc element type. Oh man, this has been a while.
The great thing is,
yeah,
we have documentation for this.
we do. So yeah, to dig in further, I recommend checking out the documentation. I think there's but the overall gist was to take the ribbon emitter and convert it into an arc emitter and allow you to dynamically set those things, so that you don't have to, like, manually do what I had to do. And then I also gave the ability to attach. So for the endpoint to follow the player, I think the ribbon one doesn't allow you to do that nicely. I think there's some stuff in there. So if you go back to the emitter,
I was just going
1 second, yeah,
demonstrate where this was.
yeah. I think
Yeah.
is it the right teleport?
Is that the one? There we go.
There we go. Yeah. So right now, each random, like, when you're in there, it actually updates the position as the ribbon point to point would do. But as soon as you get out, it just lingers it. And so there's, like, this idea that you can kind of spawn the emitter a few times and allow it to linger without following the endpoint. So then that, yeah, there's a bit of jank with it, because, like, ribbons are hard once you hit, when they're parallel to the camera. So, but I thought it was a kind of a neat solution, and it's pretty performant. We're not using anything fancy, just a lot of the partition particles and the ribbon renderer.
Yeah. It's
I really
cool.
like the arcs that come off the player and then hit the ground. That's like a little detail that I think adds a lot of
Yeah,
ability to it.
yeah. I didn't get to polish that as far as I'd like, but yeah, I think it uses the same emitter. Just so what we have here is you have the main Tesla arc, and then I have an effect that spawns on the player. And then in that player effect, I have the arcs going from a random point on the player to the ground. And then the arc tangents are based on the random position it's trying to hit. And so there's a lot of randomness with this, which is nice. And then you can tweak the radius values and whatnot. But yeah, it was kind of a fun thing to work on. At first, I thought I was only going to get a little bit of time, and then I don't know if it was you or Wyeth Dan was like, "No, keep going with it." And so yeah, it became
It's a great example. And I think it's going to be really useful because this can be repurposed for so many different things.
Yeah. I think I added a mix of lightweight and stateful emitters, or stateless and stateful emitters in there. And I stole some of Jonas's sparks, the collision sparks there. But yeah, it's trying to think if there's anything else that was kind of significant of this. If you go to the system level, I believe that's where a lot of the random positions was happening. So, and I think I do a line check. Yeah, there's a hit scan there. So the hit scan, I believe, is just for the where it's hitting on the ground. And then I have this, if you enter the volume, there's a has target. And that will actually, that's where it turns on the updating position. And if you go on the arc main emitter, Dan, and go to arc update. So yeah, there we go. Update position. So that was like a feature that didn't exist on the ribbon when I first started. So I was like, oh, I'll just add that. And then it turned into this whole arc emitter. But that allows me so each loop, you could have the arcs just stay residual, and that's how you're getting the random arcs. I think you can do multiple. So if you have loops, or if the arc lasts longer than the loop, it'll just keep the arcs there, where before it would constantly update that. So that was kind of a nice update to the ribbon emitter. And then the noise profile is, that was like the last touch, where it's just using the, if you know what the vector, I think it's like the vector field module. I just stole some of that math in there and set up. And that's what gives some of that, just a little bit of random position along the arc to give it that noise. And then I think there's a bit of movement as well. Yeah, some panning. So it was kind of a fun little emitter to work on. And yeah, I thought maybe one day I'll package it up nicely for UE proper. But hopefully people find this valuable and have fun with it. There's like a lot of dials and stuff they can play with in each of those modules. But yeah, feel free to read the reference page and check it out.
Yeah, very cool. Okay, let's move on to the pickups. So the pickups, just
go
back over here.
Do you want me to go over that as well?
Yeah, sure. So that's these things here. We've got the ones that are put overlays on the entire character, and also the put on the weapon. So let me go to here.
Yeah.
Do you want to start with the systems themselves or the
just let's look at we'll look at the idle. You'll notice they're kind of grayscale. The blue inside, I think, was just a residual of the default color. But so the goal here was to kind of show off the lightweight emitters. So I, being at Epic for 5.5, using Niagara, we learned, Niagara is amazing and very expansive, but it's pretty heavy in some cases. So for simple things, it was more expensive to use Niagara than a static mesh or what Cascade used to be. And so what they did was they addressed that with these lightweight emitters. They're actually a lot cheap. I think they're even like way cheaper than Cascade now. They're just a little bit more limited. And so Dan mentioned that earlier. One of the limits is you can't use it for anything world space. So you can only use lightweight for local space. So that's something to consider. But I do highly recommend using these to start your effect, so that you're not, you're not going to town with Niagara stateful and then only to realize you're using it for a glow or for something very, very simplistic. But yeah, that was one of the things I was trying to attain, solve here, was just showing how you could use lightweight emitters for something simple like a pickup with multiple elements. You'll notice that there's some user parameters in there. I think it's just color. Yeah, so color primary, secondary. So you just pull this in, throw it in your game, and choose the colors you want. I think I made a pretty crude blueprint setup for this. That it's an item. I think it's a pickup spawner / pickup built in. And once you roll over it, I have a few game effect kind of things that I set up for whether it's a buff or a debuff, depending on what you want. But one key thing here with the lightweight emitter system to note is the system state. So you'll notice in this, the system state is unchecked. And that's just like, so they added us an even more efficient path for lightweight. If you have a full system with just lightweight, and you can have system spawn properties, but nothing in update. As soon as you disable that, you'll notice it says stateless, and then there's a fast U.
It's hard to read it, but it's fast U, yeah, and it's on the.
You make sure you
display, yeah.
So having that, once you see that, you're like at the optimal, and this is like, I think it's like the next cheapest to a static mesh. And so if you're looking for optimization, if you're using you're working on mobile or something, you don't need world space and you don't need the crazy math of Niagara stateful, then this is your solution here. It does sprites, lights. I think in this build it does decals, right? I'm pretty sure.
Yes. Well, you use them in the explosions, I believe.
Yeah, I believe it has everything except for probably component render, which is fine. That's a scary render, but
gotcha. Yeah. If I click on here, these are the renderers that are currently available.
It's got it all. And then the interface for it is pretty similar. It's just a lot more limited, and so it's just straight to the point. It gets you what you need, and if you want to go further, then you can take it to a full stateful. But yeah, this is just an idle pickup. And then if you look back at the content browser, so we have the pickup spawn, success, and timeout. The materials are pretty. I think I just used some Voronoi noise and stuff like that for the materials panning through it, and then little sparkles. But if we look at the blueprint, that's where the meat is. Or you could just, I guess we could just go in game and show it. I think you ran through it first already. Yeah, I just had them, the blueprint just has like a simple collision detection. And then if you run over it, it'll play the what's it called? The consumption effect. And then it'll give you a buff on you. I think there's a timeout as well. Yeah, so I made a timeout and then a spawn in. And so the blueprint itself has a bunch of properties on it. You can check the documentation. You can hide all the debug stuff too, or get rid of it, or implement your own version of it. But yeah, the weapon debuff is the same as the character, except it applies it to the weapon. And so I think we have 2 weapons, right? You scroll. There was like a second, there you go. And so that weapon also takes in the effect. And again, we do the setup for the buffs and debuffs have an overlay material if you can afford it, the Niagara system, and then the I think that's it. Yeah, overlay and Niagara system. And then the Niagara system is more, there's a weapon version and a player version. And if you go to the player version, I think that's in effects_player.
Okay. You're looking for
the effect folder. Sorry, I was thinking I could zoom circle it, but we're not. Yeah, so you can see these are the buffs and stuff, and you also see the electricity that I used for the Tesla arc is the same. But if you open that up, the buff or debuff on the far left.
player buff.
Yeah. I want to thank Dan for driving here because my just maybe an hour before this, my internet went down, and so my main computer, I can't log in and do this. So thank you, Dan.
Sure.
Yeah, so in this effect, you'll see there's the element, the sparkle, and the glow. The element is just that like kind of wispy smoke thing. The sparkles are the sparkles, and then the glow is a little addition I added. It uses I think it's a capsule sprite. It's like a special material that renders from all angles. And then if you scroll to the 0 frame, I think you can even just scroll it on the timeline. You can see it. Yeah, so this is my hacky way of doing a character aura, but we take our skeletal mesh DI, which is just provides you the bones, and you can select an array of bones. And then I created my own array, the shape scale array that has the little green bubble there, and in the system level. And so you'll see when you click on that, you'll see like a lot of there's a bunch of numbers, and each of those just correspond to the first two are the radius, and then the second one is the length of each what we'll call a capsule. And so what I did is I tried to map that to each bone that I mapped from the skeletal mesh, and then that's how you're getting the glow that looks like the shape of a character. And so you could dig into that more. That was kind of a fun one for me because it's often hard to solve like character glows and without using a stencil buffer or something fancy. So this is a nice solution for that. It's just a little bit of manual work. What else is there? And then you'll notice as well the colors are the same two as the buff and debuff, the pickup. And so what I tried to do in the pickup blueprint is associate all the colors through and through from the pickup to the application and then the effect that you saw in game. And so whatever you set that color to be will carry on and feel themed in the same way. And I think Dan, when we
was just looking in the character blueprint, but that's the dissolve. That's
the dissolve, yeah.
Blueprint, which is a somewhat similar kind of concept. Where is the
dissolve? I'm trying to think of where I think the buff debuff is on the those are the game effects.
Oh yes,
blueprint folder. Sorry, trying to remember. Oops. You go to blueprints, and then we have, or is it status parent? Maybe. I think so. Yeah, and then these just get applied. Apply effect. Yeah. I'm trying to think of how that happens through the buff blueprint, or sorry, the pickup blueprint, I believe. So this gets called, and then it takes in a bunch of information. You can see on the details panel, there's like looping status effect, color primary, secondary, duration. And so there's a few properties and stuff that maybe you want on a buff or a debuff. I've worked on a bunch of RPG games, so my naming of things is influenced by that.
Yeah, this is more of an advanced topic, but should definitely dig into that, and let me pull up the documentation on that as well.
The cool thing too is I think you didn't get to show it with the NDCs, but for the foot footsteps, we were able to carry that. So we had a property stored on the player, and we were able to carry that over to the NDC and send it through the data channel. So when when you got the one buff, you got the colored footstep. So there's lots of ways to like interact with like using NDCs to send data through and make a responsive game, or a game that kind of represents the visuals that you want to achieve here. So if you like walk in here, now your footsteps are the same. I think it's like the primary color.
Yep.
And you get bubbles too. So
yeah, very cool.
Yeah, and the weapon, I think I don't think I got to the impacts, but the weapon had the muzzle flash, and that's just done through the muzzle effect. But yeah, hopefully these are, pickups are valuable in games, and a lot of games have them. So I was like, why not? They're an easy win, and you get to learn a little bit about lightweight emitters.
Yeah, very cool. So what else have we got on the list? How are we doing for time?
We are doing good. We got about 30 minutes left.
Okay. We can quickly go over projectiles. We have some very basic projectiles set up. Some of the FX weapons projectiles. So these are just projectile blueprints which are set up. There's a master one which contains the simplified logic which applies to everything. Way in here, oops, you can see my very fancy static mesh that I built for a projectile, and this is just the overlap volume, just to trigger. So when you spawn the projectile and you just give it a velocity in a direction, and it shoot off into the world, and then when it hits something, it'll trigger an impact. So each projectile has a trail system attached to it. This is a very simple one. So if I go just follow the breadcrumb, there's a simple ribbon trail. The default impact style is using that one. It's just a little trace. And then we have the rocket trail, which is more of just a simple sprite-based trail. And you can just drag that into the world as you move it around. Oops. It just does stuff. Just leave a trail behind it. So that's attached to the projectile itself. Just bring that back up again. Oops. And then when it hits something, let me just backtrack and find blueprints. So for example, the rocket projectile. This has the trail system that we just looked at. And then when you hit something, where are we? It actually passes control. To try and keep this separate, we actually put it into a separate blueprint just to make it more extensible. So you can build on top of these as well. So it's doing very similar things. It's finding about where it actually hit, and then based on I haven't shown this yet, but in the gallery level, we have these little dust piles, the little just circles in the gallery, which have a different physical material attached to them. So we can trigger a different type of explosion based on if you're hitting dirt versus the rest of the world. So we do a simple test based on the physical material, and then we choose on impact, different sizes, different scales, the different systems. These set different physics impulses based on the size of the explosion, that kind of thing. This is the set where we're firing the physics impulse into the scene. And then here's where we actually spawn the different systems. The reason why we have spawn system attached as well as spawn system at location is I may as well show you. You just go to this distant gallery. It's a little bit easier to see here. So if I switch to explosions and I start shooting on some of these beach balls, you'll notice that the little decals stick to the balls. So as we shoot them around, they actually rotate with the physics balls as well. So that's why we have spawn system attached versus spawn system at location. If on the wall, it'll just spawn them at that location. Okay. Yeah, so by all means, go through here. I think, yeah.
To say like it's kind of funny like doing this example pack, and I think we spent a good chunk of our time setting all this stuff up as opposed to working in Niagara. And so
It's
yeah.
one of those things, yeah, for an effects artist, the Niagara section is just a relatively small section, really. You still got to make it work with all the gameplay and have it look good in context and performance and everything else. So it's important that we kind of expose as much as this in this example pack as possible.
Yeah, I think that's something that folks don't expect, right, when they get into this kind of thing, is that the vast majority of development time is like building systems, right? It's just like making the systems that then allow you to do whatever it is that you're doing, design the gameplay, implement the art, do the VFX, make the audio sound, any of that sort of stuff. A lot of that initial dev is just building the systems and refining the systems and make sure that they're performant and they do everything that you need them to do, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and I think a lot of game developers are generalists by nature. They want to build their game, so it's important that we try and demonstrate as much as possible. But as Alim alluded to earlier, we are not game designers by trade, so be a little patient with us on how we've set some of these things up. We've tried to do our best, but there are other ways of being able to set these up as well. So. Yeah.
And that's another important thing to hit on too, right? Is like obviously there's best practices, and in general, it's a good idea to try to implement as many best practices as possible. But at the end of the day, there really is just, does it work? And does it work in a way that's performant?
Yes.
If you've gotten both of those things, then you did it, right? Like it doesn't have to be done exactly in a very specific way in most cases. There's usually multiple different ways that you can tackle a problem.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, I feel like we've thrown an awful lot of information at you guys. We will try and answer as many questions as we can. Dig through it, pick it apart, have fun with it. We do consider this as a live project. As time allows, we will try and add more things to it, and as different projects highlight different needs that we think this content pack could benefit from long term out there, we will try and keep it up to date, etc., etc. At the moment, this content pack is Unreal Engine specific. We do have it on our list to take a version of these assets and make them UEFN compatible. There are different feature sets at the moment within things. So I will say that this is coming soon. We will do our best to get that stuff to you in a timely manner, as our other responsibilities allow. But it is on our list. It is something that we are working towards. It will definitely happen. I just can't say exactly when yet. What else? I think we've covered everything on our list. There are other bits and pieces that you will find as you start digging through Niagara Examples, with the sparks and the fire and little bits and pieces like that. They're set up in very similar ways. Some of them are more involved than others. I think most of the things that we've covered are the meat of the project. Please, have fun with it, dig into it to get what you can out of it.
Awesome. Yeah, we can go ahead and jump into some questions. Actually, your previous thing you were just mentioning kind of teed up two different points that I wanted to bring up. One of the questions that we had was right here, which is, were there any effects that you wanted to incorporate into the pack but weren't able to do so due to either time or resource reasons?
Yes. There always is. There are so many different things. Yeah. I mean, I would have loved to have I've spent a little bit more time on. So originally, the goal was to not only do real-time game-centric pack, but to also have like an add-on pack, either in the same pack or a separate pack, that was based more on cinematics, like offline cinematics. So we would dial up some of these to more expensive, like starting to incorporate fluids, and also incorporate some of the heterogeneous volumes work with sparse volume textures that we've been working on as well. That's one aspect that we could potentially explore. We would have loved to have been able to do the UEFN pack at the same time. It's just finding time and resources to do all these things, but that is definitely next on our list, is to do that UEFN version and incorporate that into it. And then just as we're going along, I think impacts and explosions, there's a million different ways that we would do that. We would actually, on my list is, I would love to do a pack which has more stylized content. I know that there is a demand for that kind
It's
of
literally
content.
the second question on the list.
Oh, really?
Is there any plan to make stylized or cartoony VFX packs?
That was like, I think that was like one of the big topics, like starting this pack, which is like make a bunch of effects that everyone could use. And you're like, well, what's their style? What are they developing? A mobile game, like a cell shaded game, or a hyperrealism? And so we kind of, like, when we discussed that, we kind of chose like the the normal templates that we release and the mannequin that we release, and we're like, sci-fi, what do we call it, Dan? It was like, just like this kind of pseudo realistic sci-fi.
Yes.
Exactly. So we're just like, let's just use that. I think we had a few stylized things pocketed, and then it was just like,
we've had a fantastic anime style explosion and missile trail that one of our artists prepared for us a while back. But that's the only element that we currently have. We need to spend some time bringing it, modernizing it, and working on that. We're really hoping to get that out into an update soon. But we really need to flesh it out to make it more useful, to generalize some of the concepts that are applied in that system, and come up with some really good templates for a stylized approach. Also, like an isometric game will require different things, to like a first person to a third person, to all these different game styles that we have, and you would author your systems in different ways based on what you need for that particular game. So we need to come up with ideas for that as well, how best to organize a follow-up pack to make that useful. But yes, there is a long list out there, and we try and stay on top of what community sentiment is about. Okay, we've got this style of tutorials coming out of our ears. What we really need is a tutorial that covers this, and some of the stuff that we've included in this pack is aimed at trying to address some of those holes. And then next up is probably UEFN with a stylized aesthetic to a lot of these things. We just need to find some time and resources to do that.
Yeah, no, that was a point that I was going to make. Is I think that the breadth of effects that we have here cover quite a large gamut. It was quite a repository here of different effects. But like you said, also there's always more. There's always cool things that we can do and add to. And it's cool to know that this is not a static project, that we might see some updates in the future. So definitely looking forward to it. One quick question. Well, actually, I'll do this real quick, because we've touched on it a few different times. We've mentioned the idea of the UEFN incorporation of this. We did get a couple different questions specifically about UEFN. I figure we could just kind of like rapid fire through those real quick, and then get back to the bulk of the other ones. Unreal Engine for Fortnite. We are warned that 4+ emitters are an issue for mobile platforms. Would lightweight emitters, negate that, or help negate that?
Certainly help negate that, yes. Yeah, I mean, mobile is such a broad type of devices. There are so many different versions of mobile these days. Some mobile phones are more powerful than a lot of consoles, Switch and stuff like that. So mileage will vary. Mobile is such a hard one to kind of isolate down. Internally, we try and steer away from GPU emitters just to increase the compatibility for all these different mobile devices. Lightweight are definitely going to help you with that. You'll still have to be careful. I mean, there are still component costs with these things, but as far as performance, yes, lightweight is definitely a thing to try. Yeah. And have got anything to add to that, Alim?
Yeah, I'm trying to think if that was that guidance from us maybe, because some of the best practices guidance we brought was coming from Fortnite, and so and our learnings there, we scale from mobile platform all the way to whatever your money can afford. But I think the reality is if you have a gameplay related emitter, don't make sure it's not GPU, and yeah, anything else that's just icing on the cake or any visual layer, you cut. But anything that's gameplay specific and crucial, you make sure it's CPU and limit the particle counts or the if it's a mesh, poly counts and whatnot. But you kind of have to decide. I think that's the complexity of nowadays games is you have there's shaders, there's mesh, there's now the emitter systems and the modules per emitter, and so now you have to balance everything based on what you're trying to achieve in your game, and sometimes that's hard for an artist not to get carried away, and so just try to step back and look at what's the meat and potatoes, and then where's the gravy, and then where's dessert, and start cutting dessert. You cut dessert first, and then you cut the gravy, and then you only keep the meat and potatoes or whatever your meal is. Hopefully that makes sense.
We have, Alim, I should say, has prepared best practices specifically based upon this examples pack, but it relates broadly to Niagara effects in general. This is a really good overview of the type of things that you should be looking for to keep things optimal, to keep things performant. We also link to a really good in-depth page, which was done by one of our other devs, which goes into a lot more detail, which is a really good read if you want to go down that rabbit hole. But this will give you a good overview of the type of things that the artists here do routinely before publishing.
Yeah, it's kind of high level, and it's just big things that make big sweeping changes, like for perf and things we've learned over the development of Fortnite.
Yeah, there's lots of good stuff in there.
Awesome. The other question that we had with just for the UEFN side is something like the Niagara Data Channel possible in UEFN?
Oh.
That's a difficult one to answer. We are coming up with we're trying to figure out what data channel this is going to look like in UEFN. With the development of scene graph and verse, there are different mechanics and different paradigms that are in effect. So we just need to figure out how we would represent the concept of data channels in that ecosystem. There are certain features, I think, that were internally kind of locked away inside Niagara. We have the ability to use data channels. I don't know the full details on that one. But it is something that is definitely on the list. It's not there yet, but it is on the list.
Copy that. Got a few questions here about best practices on how to achieve certain particle effects or just certain situations here. I don't expect you to fully build out a system here, but maybe some best practices or some guiding tips here. One of the questions we had was, how can I make a Niagara system emit from one socket on one character and flow to a socket on another character?
Like a beam kind of effect, like a point-to-point
some
type
sort of
thing.
tether, I would assume.
So there's two the way I could think of, there's two ways. You could either just feed in the get a blueprint, the attached effect, or the effect attached to the player. You could pick whatever socket you want, either through the blueprint or using the skeletal mesh DI. The end socket, you're better off feeding it through the blueprint, just getting the blueprint to feed those positions for you.
And that would go through a user parameter.
Through a user parameter. That might be the best way if you only want like one socket per player or one position per player. I wouldn't use the skeletal mesh DI unless you're going to fully utilize it in your Niagara system, just because it's like you're better off just feeding the position, like attaching it in blueprint to that specific socket, rather than attaching it to the player, feeding in that one position. So it's like, yeah, it really depends on that. But blueprint's probably your best bet, and then user position, user parameters.
Awesome. Another question that we had here is, I want to make a swarm of bees that attack a city's residents. Would that be something that I could do with Niagara particles, or creating a character and using the mass crowd system?
Either, honestly. We do have an example. I believe it is in the content examples project that you can download, I believe, from Fab these days. There is a Boyd's example. I think that particular project has crows which fly around. So there is a way that you can do that inside Niagara if you wish. There's a lot of modules that control, based on proximity, the flight path for particles, and it includes banking and all the rest of that kind of stuff. Those things tend to be a little bit more expensive. You are having to trace ahead to figure out avoidance against collisions and things like that. The mass system would have to do a similar kind of thing. The potential advantage with Niagara is that, assuming your platform supports it, you can offload that to the GPU, and you can use some of the GPU stuff for that. The animation itself, typically controlled as a vertex animated texture. There are certain restrictions based on that, shadowing, those kinds of things. You have to switch on some of the more expensive C-bars to update your world position offset for ray tracing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there, mileage may vary on vertex animated textures, but we have certainly used that approach in the past on different things. We even used it on the Big Bang event back in the day for crowds and things like that. So yes, you can definitely use Niagara for that. Yeah.
And maybe just to add, so we used it there's the jungle season. I forget what it was called, the wilds or something in Fortnite. So there was these random bees or a swarm of bugs that were flying around. I think the big question more is how accurate do you want the simulation of these things? Because we're making games here, or we are here. So we try to cheat as much as we can to keep it under perf, and then we push the boundaries when we want that the accurate simulations and stuff. But I think if you're okay with dealing with interpenetrations and things like that, you can get it pretty cheap in Niagara. I think it's only when you're oh, this is clipping into this, and that that bee ran into this, and then now you're getting into a little bit more layer of complexity. But yeah.
In the instance of the bees, you might even be able to get away with more of that than you would expect compared to some other sorts of systems, right? Things that are small, dense, chaotic. It's harder to track and go, oh, that bee intersected with that bee, and they just went through. Unless you have some sort of slow-mo effect, and you're really paying attention to that, that might not be something you would notice, and therefore you can get away with some of those things.
I think the example.
It's just such a sliding scale with complexity. Some of the things that we've also run across is it's okay having the bees fly around, and that's fine, especially with birds and stuff. But if you want that bee to settle on a flower or a bird to land on a branch, then you're adding a whole new layer of complexity on top of that, where you really need to be very accurate of not only the position and to land it accurately, but then you've got to start blending between animation cycles, which is not trivial with vertex animated textures in a lot of cases. And at that point, maybe a mass and a full crowd system is a better way to go. Yeah.
And this is another example of like there's multiple ways to achieve that, right? Like you could, depending on the needs of the system or the game and the system, is incorporate all those more expensive sort of aspects into it. Or you could have like the hero B, right? That is just has the
Exactly.
other this particle system kind of parented to it. So he can do the thing where he lands and does all that sort of thing, and the rest are just kind of that generalized particle system.
Exactly. Yeah.
It depends on what you want to spend. Like if you're a bee game, like you're a beekeeper simulator, and then maybe you want to spend the cycles, or if not, then they're just little 2D flip books. Like
The idea of having a game where you control like we'll use bees in this example, just like a cloud of bees, and you go cause mischief, kind of sounds kind of fun, actually. Another question we had here is any guidance on how to add my own custom particle-based simulations to a Niagara system?
Custom-based simulations. In what respect?
Yeah, it's not clear. I almost assume like from maybe another DCC,
Oh,
are they like
okay.
bats? Like
maybe.
maybe a
I'm
bat?
inferring here.
Yeah, well, so there's a couple of different things that this could be taken. There used to be, I'm not sure if it still is around, there is a Houdini plugin that is available where you can import points directly into Niagara and play them back as like a point cache. The other way that I potentially thought they may be referring to is something like you're doing maybe a fluid simulator. We have obviously hosted Niagara fluids inside of Niagara that uses simulation stages on the GPU, and that is a full. We have not only do we have a flip-based solver, but we also have a position-based dynamics grain solver built into Niagara as well. So you can get very advanced, and there are lots of examples out there of people using Niagara as a framework for a more advanced type of simulation. Hopefully that answers your question, but yeah.
Or if it's
That
like the
actually-
sparse volume stuff. Like I never got to play with that much, but maybe
Sorry,
that's
say
what they're
again?
talking. The sparse volume stuff we did. Yeah, I don't know if that's Niagara specific, but I think that's
Yeah, so at the moment, most of the simulations that we have use dense grids. By that, I mean it is a fixed 3D grid, and we maintain all cells, whether they're empty or not. One of the things that we do support now is being able to import a VDB into the edit engine. They're converted into this thing called the sparse volume texture, SVT, and we can render those through the heterogeneous volumes system now that we have. They're very performant for a given state of performance. You're still dealing with a grid-based simulation, so relatively speaking, it is expensive, but we can play back in real time. We actually used those in the Marvel 1943, the Captain America demo that we did with Skydance a while back. There is a barrel flyer that is using heterogeneous volumes for that. Yeah.
we also I think we shipped it in, I forget which season of Fortnite.
That's true. Yeah.
Was it the Doctor Doom? It was like one of the towers or bases. But there's like this big smoke plume that I'm pretty sure we used it for.
Yeah.
Great. Another question we had here was I am a self-taught person. How can I use this as a VFX artist? I've been playing around with Unreal Engine for a while, but Niagara feels like a league of its own.
Lightweight emitters. That's my.
It is a good place to start. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's like a good entry point into Niagara. You're absolutely right. It does have a steep learning curve. and it can be a bit overwhelming just because it is such an open system that you can do anything you like with it. So you do need to kind of like explore as you go. Yeah, as Alim says, lightweight is a good place to start, and then from there, look at the learning examples. In the when you're creating a new system, it'll pop up a little wizard for you. There is a section under there which is like learning. Well, I think it's just called learning actually. There's templates and then there's learning, and that goes through some of the more common examples of just basic how to emit in a grid, how to emit from a static mesh, etc., etc. So there are those things. The way the question was phrased, I'm not sure if you're also talking about you wanting to do more sequencer-based offline stuff. There are documentations on the Developer Hub for that kind of stuff as well. I think actually if you search for my name, I wrote a couple a while back on how to use Niagara for linear content. If that's what you're looking for as well, there are a few tips and tricks there on how to use it with sequencer, and then how to use movie runner queue to make those frames out.
Another question we have here is, we've heard lightweight emitters mentioned a few times in this session. Is there a simple rule of thumb folks can follow to know when to use the lightweight versus standard emitter?
So anything world space, you're going to struggle to use a lightweight emitter. If it's local space, if it's attached to something, and when I say attached, I mean you're not just attaching the point of emission to something, you're attaching the entire system. So if you move it, all of your particles are going to go with it. That is restriction number one, and a fairly fundamental one at that. And then really you just need to look at the modules which are exposed on this fixed function emitter and see whether it does what you need. For glows and buffs and debuffs and pickups and stuff like that, I would strongly recommend that you at least look at lightweight emitters. Missile trails, probably not. Any kind of trailing effect really is not going to be so good for that kind of stuff.
I think like you should start personally, like now that it's out there, start with your lightweight, and then if you get stuck, go to stateful, like the full. But it's like, I think that's like, and then besides the stuff Dan mentioned, it's like world space, it's a no-go. Collision is a no-go. There's like, yeah, there's like a few things.
Yeah, data channels you won't really be able to use with lightweight.
No.
Right. A couple, these two are probably pretty quick answers. What version of UE is this available on?
So we authored it in 5.7. So that was our current engine version at the time, and we wanted to demonstrate all the latest and greatest tools that the Niagara team has developed. Moving forward, we're not sure where we will go with that. We'll try and keep it within 5.7 for compatibility where we can. Once we move over to and do some a UEFN version, we'll keep with the live version of what whatever engine version that is. But at the moment, it's 5.7.
Great. And then this one's more of like a general question, but I think it's worth addressing here. And that was, we see that a lot of these projects, I'm assuming sample projects, are done using blueprints instead of C++. Is this for performance reasons, or is it because it's something that wouldn't ideally be created or enhanced in C++? My assumption is that it's just because Blueprint is more accessible, so it allows more people to jump in and interface with these sort of sample packs.
Absolutely, yeah. It's I'm not an engineer. I definitely don't code in C++. It's been many years since I have. So and blueprints are designed to be that. I hesitate to the word user-friendly. Approach to
I think
accessible. There you go. Yes, yes. There's a lot of fairly complicated concepts that we're dealing with, and And Blueprint is a way of being able to expose that out to lots of different artists with lots of different backgrounds. There's nothing to stop you from putting it in C++ and doing it that way. But the drawback is that you now have to have an engineer to do that work for you. You will struggle to modify, unless you happen to be an engineer and you're the sole developer, then go for it.
By all means.
But if you're relying on a team of effects artists and you want to give them some more autonomy to be able to do their thing, then you need to make sure that that functionality is accessible as possible.
All the interfaces are there for C++, and most of these things we'd probably like prototype and get someone to do it for us. But me and Dan aren't C++ programmers, so I think we struggled enough with blueprinting, figuring that out.
Yeah, and that's a good point to just kind of like state, right? Is like full C++ will largely be more performant in general.
Oh yeah.
The cost of Blueprint, though, is sometimes overstated. It's not nothing, right? But like there's a lot of instances where like we're talking fractions of a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a second. So really, when it comes to development, you're kind of thinking about budget in terms of a couple different things. You have your performance budget, right? But you also have your time budget, and you also have your resource budget. And the resource, I mean, like who's on your team and what are they currently working on. If you have, a handful of C++ coders, but they have a bunch of other jobs that they need to be doing, then it may not make sense for you to then try to tap into them to do something that you could do in C++, even if in Blueprint, even if the Blueprint has like a slight overhead. Now, on the flip side of that, there are certain things that you just can't do in Blueprint, like that you have to use C++ for. So this is a really good example of just like kind of figuring out what the needs of your project are and where you're at. Like if you are like, I want to make the most insanely performant, I want to have all these effects, I want to do all this sort of thing, where then you really do need to start scraping like nanoseconds of processing power, then maybe you might want to stop, or convert some things that were done in Blueprint to C++ to affect that. But in most cases, there's going to be room in that budget for blueprinting, because again, blueprinting isn't that expensive. It does have a little bit of an overhead. It's not, like you should. It completely depends on the need of the project.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I think if you're following best practices, in a lot of the projects that I've worked on, when it gets right down to it, when you really need the engineering help to figure out where your bottlenecks are, where the performance is going, a lot of that bottleneck and a lot of that expense is renderer specific. The simulation costs themselves, as long as you're using best practices and you're careful about it, then you can, at that point, you can then, where necessary, as you said, start converting things to C++ if you really need that extra boost. You just have to weigh the pros and cons and whether the juice is worth the squeeze, as they say.
Absolutely. We have two more questions here. These are a little bit more technical, so we'll kind of run through them real quick. If a asset has multiple material slots, or it uses physical material mask to have multiple PM in one material slot, we should trace for complex in that case, otherwise we will return PM of material index 0. How expensive is it to trace for complex for bullets and footsteps?
Yes. I am not the best person to give you a nuts and bolts in this case. This is going to be more efficient than this case. Most of that logic, I would suggest, would be done in Blueprint or even C++. So the cost would be incurred there. And I'm sure there are a million different ways that you can get that information. I would not even want to give you an approximate answer there, because I'm probably going to just make something up.
Yeah. I think as well, like, I think if it is expensive, like things you could consider is like do it close up where it matters, and then at a distance, like give yourself a distance threshold, and then as soon as it passes that, like who cares? Unless your game, unless your game is like Impact Simulator and you need to see every single decal at the right, physical material. But I think it's, but I don't know. It's beyond my knowledge.
Yeah.
Awesome. Last question we had here was, what would you recommend for getting spawn point for decals and VFX assets on assets where simple collision can't really replicate the shape of the mesh? Should it use complex for second trace after initial projectile impact, or is there a better approach to snap decals and VFX onto surfaces?
I've certainly used that approach. Maybe the initial traces, there's also sign distance fields that you can use, and then like trace the complex collisions on top of that as a two-step process. Sometimes we've had to cheat because skeletal meshes, we don't have a great solution for colliding against skeletal meshes. We'll sometimes collide against the capsules or whatever, and then have to do a secondary trace or a secondary adjustment to put it sort of an approximate location where it's going to track, sometimes based on the bone, etc. So definitely, that two-stage process is a good one. I have used it in the past with some success. Other approaches are, if you've got the perf and your platforms support it, we do have an async GPU trace module in Niagara, which will trace against the VVH, I believe it's called, the actual representation in the game of the ray trace geometry, which can be, depending upon your settings and how far away you are from it, can be more accurate. It's a rabbit hole that you can descend down just to see what kind of system that you can go from there. A lot of these things, you do your best approximation from blueprint, and then sometimes then that information is passed into Niagara, and at that point I may do a very short ray trace to try and snap it to the renderable geometry, and maybe that will help. It's use by use, case by case, very much. But there are these things that you can try. Some work, some don't. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, a huge thank you to you both for not only putting together the examples pack, but then also coming here to not only show it off, but then answer a bunch of questions for the pack here. I know I'm going to immediately go and download this. It's on my list for a while, and now I got to go in and play around because those explosions look too fun.
Right.
But
thanks for having us.
Really appreciate you taking the time to do this. And I really appreciate everyone on the show for taking the time to do this as well. This show would not be what it is without you, your time, or your questions. And if you came in at any way, at any point partway through the stream and wanted to rewatch a section, no worries. We have all of our videos posted in VOD format on both our Twitch and YouTube channel at Unreal Engine. You can also keep up with the latest news, shoutouts, and other cool information on all of our socials at Unreal Engine. And if you haven't already, please come join us at the Epic developer community, where we have our documentation, tutorials from both the community and Epic staff alike, like Dan here, our forums, and much, much more. But again, huge thank you to you folks for joining us, and huge thank you to everybody for watching. And we will see you. This is a special Tuesday version of Inside Unreal. We still have the Thursday version as well. So we will see you folks in a couple days. All right. Bye, everybody.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
You guys.